Chris, you might as well introduce yourself. Thanks a million for taking the time out as well to do this with us today.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing to have somebody with so much experience in teaching actually teach one of these things, because usually it's me, and I'm definitely not experienced at this stuff. It usually goes off the rails way too fast. So yeah, why don't you tell the people who you are for people that don't know and what you do?
Yeah, of course. My name is Chris, and basically I create tech courses. So at the moment, my courses are Vue.js based. I have a React course, I have a couple of WordPress courses, and also a full stack course. Although in the past I've kind of had a wide range of courses, that's something which I'm kind of going back on and trying to specialize in more sort of focused areas, sort of sticking to Vue.js and front-end frameworks, because I think sometimes when creating courses, you can sort of spread things too wide. Whereas, you kind of get known for one thing. I mean, probably after this meetup, it may be Vue.js, who knows? But, some course creators have lots of different types of courses, different areas. But yeah, definitely looking to focus on just one or two areas from now. And I guess that's just experience from making courses for 5 years. When I first started, I wanted to create courses on everything, but now I can definitely see the value in just sort of focusing on one or two different areas. I have a YouTube channel, so if anybody wants to check that out. I also have a blog, and the blog's something which I've not really focused a lot of attention on up until maybe sort of January or February. But yeah, it's definitely something which is building up now. There's maybe 30 to 40 blog posts on there.
Nice.
So yeah, definitely looking forward to putting more stuff out there.
Lots of content, and we've seen it. I've put links in the meetup as well to all your courses, and a list of them. I just seen Jay said that there is echo. So is there echo from both of our chats, or is it just mine? I'm just checking.
Should I mute my speaker? We'll
just see.
So I've just switched off the audio.
Okay, let's see, just in case it was given some feedback. No, all good now. Okay, excellent. That's fine.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and so big question for me. I'm even this microphone and everything. So for people that don't know, I got talking to Chris through Twitter. We just ended up talking a lot of crap together about, I suppose, making content. I write blog posts and teaching, obviously, through the meetup now. And I would love to be making courses very like Chris. So I'd ask him a lot of questions. Even this setup I have here now is all thanks to Chris's setup. I think I've even actually got the soundboard based on Chris's recommendations. So an interesting thing to me, because everyone takes different paths this way, is how did you end up, I suppose, as an instructor rather than, I suppose, like the rest of us, building for a living?
Probably a couple of reasons. Mostly because as a web developer, I started taking courses myself. And then when you start taking courses, you sort to, I'm kind of one of them people who will see something and think, I can do that too. So when I think the first time I took a course, it was kind of along the lines of, okay, I'm learning something here, but I could do this too. And I also had the sort of impression where, as a freelance web developer, if you build a website, you build it once and get paid. And if you build a course, you can build it once and get paid multiple times. So, of course, it wasn't all about the money, but it was kind of in general terms of building a business. I have a family, so as great as free content is, you do also need to have a business behind the web development too. So yeah, I mean, I do enjoy freelance work, but I also enjoy the freedom of going to work in the morning and also just being able to build what I want. If I had a course coming out and a project which needed to be built, I can start working on that for the morning, and if something comes up with the kids in the afternoon, it just gives so much, flexibility. So that was kind of the big motivation for me. And once I'd done the first one, it was kind of the first course led onto the sort of pathway to me thinking, right, how can I take this $100 a month or whatever it was creating into a full-time job? So I guess it kind of depends on the mentality and what you want back from it. Some people are happy making $100 a month off a course. I was over the moon when that happened. It was brilliant. But yeah, as a business, you had to look at the long term and how can we sort of progress from freelance into sort of making courses a full-time living. And generally, the way to do that is a following or momentum. So you build the first course, and then the second course, you try to build upon that and you get better. And it just it's all of, momentum and how things keep rolling on.
Excellent. And how long did it take you to get, I suppose, the momentum to do it full time, I guess? Because I think a lot of people only see the finished product and they go,
yeah,
like I'm sure when you seen that person or whoever's course you were watching and you said, I could do this, that doesn't look too difficult.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to go from, I suppose, working to being a full-time teacher?
Probably, well, the first couple of courses took about 3 months each because they were on the side. They weren't really a full-time job. They were just, after work hours. So once the first course started, maybe 3 months later, sort of money started coming in from it, followers started coming in from it, and then maybe another 3 months for the second course. And it probably a couple of years, really. I mean, you do see some people hit the ground running. They'll create a course on, Udemy or something like that. And there's sort of two directions they tend to take. They either have their own following to start with, and they can divert 10,000 people to the course, and that sort of gains traction. Or the other sort of way is, course platforms like Udemy will just pick up on something. And I don't know if that's a new technology or whether it's a search which meets the algorithm. I don't know what the formula is, but sometimes you see just a new instructor just take off. There's also other things as well. I mean, platforms like Eggheads may just take an instructor who's never done it before and suddenly give them this huge platform to work with. So everyone's journey is completely different.
Excellent. Yeah, for sure. Definitely something I'm interested in. I'm sure I'll be annoying you more. I'll probably won't annoy everyone else in the chat with my selfish questions because I could do this for 2 hours. So we might as well ask you. So yeah. I'm going to start the war here. Yeah, I'm going to start the war here. I am a React developer. So
I knew this one.
Yeah. So no, and to be fair, I have used Vue a few years ago now. I've never put it into production. I've only played around with it, so I have forgotten basically everything I know. So for the people at home who have maybe even just started a web development journey, do you want to tell us what's great about Vue or why you're using it? You're building your own course platform on it at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah. First of all, I use React too. I do like React. I'm not trying to calm the war here, but I do actually like both Vue and React. But from my own personal perspective, I think probably when I started using React, I don't know if it was the same kind of time as you, but React didn't have Create React App at the very start. So we had to build all the Webpack tooling, configure Babel, and all the different setups. So I think there was probably a good couple of hours of work just before you could even begin to start writing React, the render functions and things like this. So I did start with React before Vue. And then once I discovered Vue, it seemed so simple. I mean, we'll obviously get into a project very soon, but the templates is just basically HTML. So we'll all see that very soon when we start writing some Vue code. It's probably the main reason why Vue is perceived to be easier to begin with than React, just simply because it has these files, which at the top is generally a template, which is HTML. We have some script below it, which is controls the data, and then we have some styles at the bottom. So it's kind of a middle ground between jumping between HTML and CSS into a sort of full-blown front-end framework. So it's not a case of sort of preferred one over the other. They're just kind of two approaches to the same problem. Obviously, the problem being handling data on the front end. So yeah, it's just a case of, I think some people prefer that middle step, which sort of Vue provides, whereas React is kind of, pretty much JavaScript. It's all JavaScript with the JSX and, the render functions and things like that, whereas Vue is kind of a middle ground between HTML and CSS, which most people start with, and then jumping into a sort of front-end framework or library.
Excellent. Yeah, and I suppose we have one question straight away based on even your on your comment. Is there something like Create Vue App?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
There's the Vue CLI. In fact, I think that was around before Create React App.
That's probably what helped get us a lot of its traction, probably.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was around first, but the Vue CLI is something which we'll jump into later if we have time.
Excellent.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start off really simple in the project.
I'm going to give you control of everything now. I'm going to put you front and center, and you can start. Yeah, we can see you now, and you can screen share and.
Yeah, we got that.
Excellent. Yeah, I think we're all good to go then.
Okay. Yeah, so just to answer the Create React App question, we'll get into that later if we've got time, and hopefully we're going to convert this app to a full kind of Webpack setup later if we have time.
Excellent. Yeah, cool.
Okay.
I think everyone should be able to see this anyway.
Great. So should we just jump in?
Yeah, fire ahead. It's all yours now. I'm going to probably only annoy you whenever I see some comments in the chat here. So you fire on.
Okay. So, is the starter template on the YouTube chat?
Yeah, I'll ping that into the chat now as well. So on the meetup, there's the code chat stuff, and I'll ping it into the chat now as well.
Okay. Yeah. So if anybody wants to follow along, there's a code sandbox which we can use, or if you just want to watch and sort of absorb the information, that's completely fine too.
Okay, I have that gone into the chat hopefully now. Okay.
People a few minutes to open it up if they want to.
Buffering a bit as my... Is this being recorded? It is being recorded. Yeah, we'll...
There we go.
There. Chandy was just about to as well. I was too slow.
Yeah, so the whole idea is if anybody wants to follow along, click on the code sandbox link and fork it, and you can follow along. If not, just sit back and hopefully learn something about Vue.js. So I'll kind of take it easy just to begin and give people a chance to open this up and get started. So one of the, you can do this with React too, but one of the sort of good things about Vue.js is we can kind of start with a simple index HTML, which we have here. If this index page has got nothing to do with Vue at the moment, so we just have the standard boilerplate. It's linking to a style sheet just to give it some nice styling. And if we scroll down, we have just basically a header section with some links. What we've basically done is create, a meetup kind of app, which is based on today's event. So we have some links at the top. We have the information about today's event, and just a chance to basically add your name to this list. And at the bottom, we'll see who's attending. So it's kind of a mini version of Meetup, just based on today's event. So that's the whole idea is we're going to take this index page and kind of pass control to Vue.js. So at the minute, everything we see is just static data. So at the top, there's a header, which we just looked at. We have this event details, which is just the date, the title. We have the Vue logo, the information about the event. And then we have this section, which is going to be the sign up, and we'll use this to pass the data to Vue, and then sort of present this down at the very bottom, which is going to be in this list section here. So everything is just simple HTML. The only thing we have is the script, which is a link to the Vue.js CDN. So it's a really sort of straightforward way of starting with Vue.js, just by including it with a CDN. We don't need to include a Webpack config, any Babel files, any configuration. We just jump straight in and we can find out exactly what Vue can do. So if we just take a look at the sidebar, we have the app.css. And the first thing we need to do is just create a app.js. So there's nothing kind of crazy going on here. We're just going to create a JavaScript file and link it to the HTML. So let's go back in to the index page, and just below our script, we'll create a new script file. And the source is going to be simply our app.js. So just to test this is working, we'll go back over to our app, and we'll just do an alert, and we'll say hi inside of here. And if we save this, we see that this is appearing on Code Sandbox. And in fact, just before we go any further, I think I've had some problems with Code Sandbox in the past, so I'm just going to shift this over to a Visual Studio Code version. This is just exactly the same. There's no difference if you're following along. We'll just open up the index page and paste this in. So yeah, if we go into the sidebar, we have our app.js. And we'll just link this at the bottom. App.js. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we kind of need to create what is called a Vue instance. The Vue instance is just a way of, we basically control parts of our index page or the whole page, depending on what we want to do. So if we want the Vue application to control everything on our page, we can link it to a big wrapper, which is going to control all of the HTML. Or another thing we can do is just have Vue.js control just a single part. So if we just had one div or one section, we can do this too. And all we need to do in our app.js is create a new Vue instance, which takes in a object. So we mentioned before that the Vue instance controls our HTML, and we do this with the L property. So if we go to the L property and add a CSS selector, such as the app, and go up, we'll see in our index page that the div, which surrounds basically all of our content, has the ID of app. So now anything which we add inside of this Vue instance will basically be available in our HTML. So probably the first thing we need to do is to create some data properties. So the data properties are basically a way of creating variables which we can use in the index page. So we're going to basically begin at the very top and work our way down. So we have our links in the top, and we're going to grab things such as our date, our title, and then move them over to our JavaScript file so we can control them from the Vue instance.
So just two questions
Yeah.
in the chat. There is
Okay.
one just wants to know what theme you're using.
This is the Night Owl theme by Sarah Drasner.
Great. Sarah always does awesome work.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, are you using Vue 1 or Vue 2?
Vue 2. Vue 1 is gone. Yeah,
Okay.
don't ever use Vue 1.
Okay, Vue 2. Excellent. All right, you can continue on. I thought it was a nice break before you started pulling in data.
No, in fact, Vue 3 is very close to being out, but we're going to talk about this later on at the end, but it's basically everything which we'll learn today will be available in Vue 3 as well. So all of the Vue 3 features are kind of additive rather than replacing what we're learning today.
Great.
We're just maybe a month away from being able to use Vue 3 in this project. So, well, hey, everything will carry over.
A nice upgrading exercise after this.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Okay, yeah. So we've got our data property, and this is kind of this is our state. If you come from a React background, this is basically our application state. So any variables which we want to use, we'll place in data. So kind of starting from the very top, the first thing we have is the meetup name. So since we're still within this app section, what we're going to do is cut the site title. And then if we go inside here, we can give this a variable name such as app name, and then paste this in as a string. So now we can use this app name anywhere inside of our HTML. And the way we output this is within double curly braces. So if we open these up and then add in the app name, refresh the browser, and we can see it's still up there at the very top. If we change this to be just anything else afterwards, this instantly updates the state inside of our component. So this is kind of going to be the general theme of what we're doing for this project. We're going to take the existing HTML and bring it over to our data. We'll introduce methods and things like computed properties, and we'll take a look at these very soon. But kind of the next thing to do is the nav links. We have 3 separate links inside of here. And of course, we don't want to, on a front-end framework, we don't want to take each one of these links and paste these in separately. We want to have something like an array where we can loop through. And the way we do that, if we go back to our app and into our Vue instance, we can create an array called links. So this is going to be a data type of array. We've looked at a string. And all we're going to do inside here is create 3 separate objects. So the first one is a name. So this is going to be the title, which we're going to display in each link. So first of all, we have home. We're also going to add an ID, which is going to be 1. And we can also add a URL. So when we loop through each one of these links, we need a unique ID, because this is going to be, just like when using React, we have to have a unique key when we're rendering out lists. So this is going to be our unique identifier for each one of these lists. We can add a URL. So let's go for google.com. We'll paste this in 2 more times. We have upcoming events. And also latest news. For Amazon and Twitter. So now we have our array. If we go back over to our index page, we can remove 2 of our links. And Vue has something called directives. These directives are kind of like just basically shortcuts or some kind of syntactic sugar which is placed in our template. So although this template is all pure HTML at the moment, we can sprinkle in a little bit of JavaScript. So for example, if we wanted to create a loop, we would use the v-for directive, which will create a for loop. So we can say link in links. And this links is going to refer to this link just here. So inside of here, again in the double curly braces, we'll just simply output the link. So now if we refresh, we see 3 separate objects. So we have the link name, the ID, and also the URL. So the first thing we need to do is to change the name. This is going to be link.name. Save and refresh. And we're pretty much taken back to where we were before. So we also need to link to the URL, and we can do this inside of the href by accessing the object with link and then the URL. So just here, link.url. So if we save this and if we refresh, as soon as we click on any of these links, we'll see that we are taken to our meetup starter and then / link.url. This is because it's taken this as a string value. In Vue.js, if we want to add an attribute which is dynamic, we need to use the colon prefix just like this. So save and reload. And there we go. So now when we click on any of these links, these are all dynamic. And we're taken to the URLs. So we mentioned before that we also need a unique key. We can also bind this with the colon and add a key and set this to our link.id. So when using a CDN, I'm not sure, we didn't get any error messages before. We'll maybe see these in the console. But particularly when we're using the Vue CLI and a Webpack setup, it will complain about not having a unique key. So this is just because we are outputting a unordered list with 3 different items, and Vue needs to be aware of the position of all 3 items if one changes. So if we remove one of these links, if we change the text, Vue needs to be kind of aware of the position and the data which each one of these has. So if we add a unique key to each one, this will kind of stop Vue guessing which is which, and it will just know to go straight to that particular link to do any updates. So that's pretty much how we do a loop inside of Vue.js. So these double curly braces, which output our dynamic data, they can also be used for basically JavaScript too. So if we say something such as 5 plus 10, refresh, we'll get the value of 15. We can also do something such as link.name plus a string such as hi. And we'll see the word hi coming up after each one. Not the best example, but it does work. That's also used for modifying the output of something such as link.name or any other data. We can use this to modify along with some methods and filters, which we'll look at later on too. But for now, though, we'll just kind of move down our application. Is everyone keeping it okay?
Yeah, there's another 2 questions there. So what are the advantages, and this is from Rob Doyle, what are the advantages that Vue has over React or Angular?
Advantages are probably kind of subjective, to which, you know, you may find that React has more advantages over Vue. I might find that Vue has more advantages over React. But I think particularly the template syntax, um, the ability to just jump into raw HTML, which you see here, and just start working with it from there, because sometimes people get really overwhelmed with JSX and all the render functions, which React has, and some people maybe don't. That's maybe just depending on people's experience. But I think one of the big advantages is definitely the ability just to jump into it, and all we've got here is a basic HTML template, and we've added a script tag, so that's all we've done, and we can now start to have dynamic control over our output. I also believe that the Vue free version is going to be faster, so don't quote me on how that's going to turn out, but it seems that a lot of the benchmarks are pointing that way.
Everyone heard Chris. You have to quote him on that the benchmarks are going to be way better. No, but I think one of the big things I know from myself from looking at this as an enterprise application level is the fact that you have things like the router built in.
In Vue?
Do you have routers and things? Because no, you don't.
No.
So, because I know at React, that's one of my biggest pain points is that you have to go cherry picking all of the pieces to put it together.
Yeah, actually, going back to Rob's question, I think that's kind of one of the advantages too, because although they try to keep the Vue.js core pretty light, the Vue router, along with the state management, are both maintained by the Vue.js core team. So whereas React router is completely fine and works perfectly well with React, it's also built, I believe, by a separate team to React. Is that right?
Yeah, it's Michael Jackson and Ryan Florence, I think.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they do an amazing job of maintaining it and keeping it compatible. But if you just look at Vue version 3, the router and also the state management package, which is UX, which it's kind of developed at the same time as Vue 3. They all developed at the same time because it's by the Vue core team. So if the Vue is going to move to Vue version 3, the router will also be upgraded at the same time. It's going to be completely compatible. The whole kind of general ecosystem is maintained by the same core team. Even Vue Apollo, if you want to use GraphQL, that's maintained by a member of the Vue.js core team. Completely open source too, but also that any upgrades are going to be completely fine. It's not a case of Vue's being updated and the maintainers of the router need to quickly catch up. I'm just always of the opinion of choosing a tool which you feel more comfortable with and most productive in. So for me, that's Vue. For other people, that may be React. I'm not here to try and change anybody's mind. And I also think that the same can be said if this was kind of reversed if this was a React workshop and somebody sort of came in and said, why should I switch to React from Vue? Probably the same kind of principles still apply. It's kind of whichever you feel most productive using. I don't think Vue or React is ever going to kind of limit a developer in terms of scalability. It's always going to be the developer or the team.
For sure. So short answer is I think these tools, especially all of these tools, were designed to create scalable JavaScript applications.
Yeah, definitely. I think the application itself and the team is going to be the bottleneck rather than whether you're using Vue or React. Particularly with some of the Vue benchmarks we've seen for version 3, it's incredible. So it's never going to be a problem in terms of speed and sort of scalability. But yeah, just go with what you feel more comfortable using. As a developer, we have to sit at our computers for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. If you're using something you don't like, switch to the other. Simple as that.
For sure. We'll let you jump back in and keep teaching there, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah.
Okay, so where were we? Yeah, so we just looked at basically rendering out arrays, and we displayed the titles just up here. Let's just go back and refresh this, and we'll move down to the date. So back in the HTML, we have this date hard-coded just inside of here. And if we go below our links, what we're going to do is we're going to change this to be part of our event. So I've just got the YouTube is moving on to the next link, which is a big picture of Dan Abramov, which is pretty pretty ironic. So what we're going to do now is create an event. So this is going to be a wrapper for all of the event information. So starting off, we have the date. So now when we go into the index page, we'll access this with event.date. So now in the position of the date, we'll open up the double curly braces. We'll set this to be event.date. Oops, we have a little issue inside of here. We just need to save the app.js. We'll just have this outside of the date property. So we'll just put this and make sure this is just after the array. Refresh, and we're good to go. So just with the problems we had before, we'll just kind of speed up with moving over this information. We'll get to some more interesting stuff in just a moment. Still within this event object, we'll add an event title. Again, as a string, double curly braces, and event.title. So just as a quick aside here, if anybody is following along and they see something like this, or if they see all of the double curly braces just like this is a syntax error. We see it all the time. It just means that something is not quite right. For example, here we've just got one curly brace on the right hand side, so just be aware of that. So next of all, we have the logo, which is just here. In the index page, we are simply linking to a standard image using the image source. So we're going to take the first step by cutting this out, and we'll upload this as a logo. And then since this is a attribute just like above, we use the colon, which signifies this is dynamic. So we also need to do this with the source. And then inside of here, we don't need double curly braces. All we need to do is to pass in the event.logo, refresh, and we'll still see it here. Just to kind of prove this is working, we'll take something off the end there, and we'll see we're taken back to the alt text. So keeping on going, we've got the event information. So we have the text just here. And this is going to be a little bit different to the strings which we had before. If we go to our event description just here, we see that in amongst the text we have a break tag. We also have the emphasis tags. So there's a couple of different ways we can approach this. So first of all, we could take out each line. We could cut these out individually and create separate data properties, but that's quite a lot of work to do this. So another way is if we take all this out, including all of the HTML elements, and then just below our logo, we'll add the description and paste it in as a string. So we see straight away by the text editor that we have some issues here. So there's two different ways we can approach fixing this. Since this is a string on multiple lines, we can either put this on to its own single line. And if we go to the index, back between the description, we can't just do what we did before. We can't go index.description and expect this to work. If we reload, we see that this will output this as a string. We have the break tags, we have the emphasis tags on either side of Vue.js. So to kind of account for any HTML elements we want to include, we need to output this as some HTML. So of course, just kind of taking HTML and outputting this is generally a sort of security concern, especially if it's coming from a user input. But since we know this information is okay, we're not receiving this from the user, we can use a Vue directive called vHTML. We add this as an attribute. If we just remove this, we can add vHTML and set this to event.description. This will now pass this as HTML, and rather than display the emphasis tags and the break tags, this is now converted to regular HTML, and we don't see the tags anymore. Okay. Is everybody still okay on the stream? Are we okay for questions?
Yeah, I think everyone's. I'm answering a couple of questions in the chat here that I can to keep you.
That's okay. If there's anything, should we just carry on?
Yeah, I think we're all good, up to date anyway.
Okay. So yeah, the next thing is we have this form to handle down at the bottom. So when we're dealing with forms, there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to account for the fact that we need to submit the form. We need to create a method which is going to handle that data. And we also need to bind the input. And the input is going to be grabbed from this text input. We're going to store this into our data and use this inside of our method. So the first thing we need to do, if we scroll down to our form, we're going to use @submit. @submit is going to allow us to basically listen for the submit event, which is going to be created by this input. So when the user inputs, when the user submits this form, we need to then trigger a method. So the method which we're going to trigger is a one called handle submit. And we can also add an event modifier. We can add .prevent. And this is going to prevent the default form behavior. So the default form behavior would be to submit this form. And of course, we don't want to do that because we want Vue to be able to be in control of everything that's happening on the front end. So it kind of prevents the form from being sent and also the default page refresh. And we then use this handle submit method to then control exactly what we want to do. We also need to use a new directive called vModel. We can add this to our input. So vModel, and we're going to set this to the value of name. So vModel is a way to set up two-way data binding. So basically anything which the user types into this input field is then going to be reflected in a data property called name. So if we save this and go over to our app, and then go to just below our event, we can add the name and set this to be an empty string. So currently this is empty, but if we add something such as Chris inside of here, this will then be reflected inside of our input. So we've got two-way data binding. So now if we refresh, we see the value of Chris just inside of here. We can also output this inside the double curly braces. So this was a data property called name. So let's refresh, and we'll see Chris is just here. And anything which we add inside of here will be, because of the two-way data binding, this will also be reflected just here. Okay, so now we have two things. We have our handle submit, which is going to be our method. We also have the data which the user will type in. So let's now go over to our app.js. Now we can create a method for this. So just after the data, we'll have the data section just here. We're going to create a new method, a new section called methods. So methods works just like any JavaScript method or function. We're going to create a section which basically does something. In our case, we're going to handle the submit. So let's go back. We have this handle submit just here. So this is going to be the name of our method. In. Okay, so to begin inside of our method, we want to check, first of all, if a name has been entered. Let's take us back to an empty string. We can use a conditional statement to check if this.name, since this is an array, we can use .length is greater than 0. So we're using this keyword just here to reference anything which is on our Vue instance. So if we wanted to refer to our app name, our links, our events, basically anything which is on here, we're going to use this keyword. And this is going to allow us to access anything which is on here, including other methods too. So we're checking if the user has entered a value. If it is, then we want to push to an array. So let's create an array called attending. And we'll see this.attending, the JavaScript push method. And we want to push the value of name. Okay, so now we've got a form which is capturing a user inside of name. We're then pushing this to the attending array. And now if we save this, and back over to our form, let's test this out. We'll say attending. Reload. We'll say Chris. And there's the value of Chris just there. We can see this is still visible inside of here. We can add as many names inside of here as we want. So next step, if we go back to our method, just after we do this, we're going to then clear out this.name, set this to an empty string. And there we go. Okay, so are we still good to go, or do you have any questions?
The only questions are about server-side rendering and Vue.
Yeah.
What tools you need to do. So my intuition says we can only do this with Node.js. So the questions are, can you use this with PHP? I'm looking for can you use it with .NET Framework and PHP, Node.js? So how do you server-side render?
With Vue.js? Well, Vue.js has, we can use server-side rendering with it, but it's pretty much comparable with React. React doesn't have server-side rendering built in by default, but we can add it. And this is kind of where frameworks such as Next for React come into play, where they have server-side rendering by default. Vue also has a version of Next called Nuxt, which has server-side rendering. It has routing built in based off the file and folder structure of our components. So yeah, server-side rendering is something which is complex to add to a Vue app, and also React. But if we let these frameworks such as Next and Nuxt take over, it's pretty simple. it's kind of out the box really for those frameworks.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, I think the only other question, really, without going off on a tangent of other languages of Python and Django and everything else that are in the chat here, is how secure is Vue and how does it handle malicious input? And I think you kind of touched off that by showing the HTML output and things to be careful of.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those questions where, be careful with what data is coming in. It's Vue and React and any other framework is only as secure as the data which is coming in. So, of course, if we take all the precautions with being careful what type of data is coming in and where it's coming from. I mean, I'm no security expert myself, but the general steps, obviously watch out for user input, sanitize it, make sure it's in the correct format before going to the server or coming back. But yeah, I think if somebody trusts React, I think they should trust Vue. It's, pretty much comparable in terms of that. But yeah, definitely it's...
I think people have to remember it is just JavaScript at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think
keep
Vue
that in
itself
mind.
is the problem. It's the data and the developer more than anything else.
Excellent. Perfect.
Okay, should we just carry on?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So yeah, now we have all of the data which we need. We're now submitting our form. The next thing to do is to output this inside of a loop. So we touched on loops up at the very top where we created a simple menu. So the way to do this, if we go back to the index page, if you follow along with the starter, we have a comment just on here with loop through names. So we'll create an unordered list, and we'll create a before loop. And this is going to be a name inside of our array. So the array is attending. So we're going to loop through this. And then inside of here, we'll output the name. So refresh the browser, go for Chris. And now we see, because of the CSS, which is already added, this is added down at the bottom of a white section. We can add a second name. And these are all adding down at the bottom. So another thing we can do when looping, we sometimes need to grab the index number. And we can do this if we surround the name inside the brackets. So the first parameter is going to be the actual name of the variable. We can also grab the index. And of course, the index position of an array is not a great key, but we can also add this in. We generally want to use something, if we're using a database, a unique ID or something like that. Let's go for name plus index, just to keep this unique. And as an example, we can also output the index too. So refresh. So each time we add a different name to our array, this is also being pushed to our loop, and we also see the index number for each individual item. So an event like we have just at the minute this is completely online. We can have as many people attending as we would like, but for example, the regular meetup which you guys have, this will be generally in a building, and sometimes you could only have maybe 50 people, 100 people, 10 people. So we would often want to restrict the number of people which we have attending. So the way we can do that, if we go back to our event object just on here, for this particular event, we can also add a capacity. And if we set this to a nice round value of 10, and also capacity percentage, we'll set that to be 0. So the reason we have two separate data properties is we're going to have the capacity, which is the total number of people the event will allow, And we also have a percentage, which is going to be used to, basically, if we look at the bottom here, we have a progress bar. So each time a new name is added to the array, this progress bar will get wider until it reaches the full width of the page. So to do this, we'll go back down to our method and we'll add to this. Okay. So back down to handle submit. This is going to be responsible for each time the user adds a new name. So this is also going to be the place where we want to check if the capacity has been reached. And if it has, we're going to display this to the user. So just after this .name.length, we're also going to check if this .event .capacity percentage is less than 100. Because each time we add to this array, we're going to increase the capacity. So we'll check if this is below 100%. If it is, then we're okay to add a new name. So to increase that capacity, we're going to first access this .event .capacity percentage. And the way we can increase this is by first accessing this .attending, which is our array just here. Since it is an array, we can access .length, and we can divide it by this .event .capacity divided by 100. So in our simple example here, we've got a capacity of 10. So if we divide 10 by 100, this will give us a value of 0.1. So each time we add, so the first person in the array is going to be 1. If we divide 1 by 0.1, this will give us a value of 10. So the first person will be 10%, the second person will be 20%. And we can then use this to make our progress bar even bigger. So let's save this and refresh. So let's add 10 different names. That's not working. Sorry, just give me a second.
This is the fun part of live coding,
Chris.
Chris,
This is the fun part, yes. So checking if the length is greater than 0 and the percentage is less than 100. Okay, first of all, we'll just go back over to the HTML. And if we look for the attendance section, okay, so at the minute we just have a pretty boring attending section. We can open up the double curly braces and make this dynamic. So we can access attending.length. So if we go back to our app.js, this is the number of people which are actually attending. Refresh, we can add our first value, and we see that we have attending the value of 1. So this is not adding to our array. Let's see what's going on.
You'll have to console log the JavaScript way.
It's the conditional. So this .event .capacity percentage. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll leave that off. So each time we add a new value to the array, we see that attending is increasing, but we also want to tell people how many people are actually allowed to attend. So back in the index, we'll do a /, and since this is also dynamic, we'll also add the event .capacity. Save this. So now, if we refresh, we see 0 out of 10. So Chris is coming 1 out of 10, and this will go up depending on how many names is inside of our array. Okay, so now we've got that, we can also access our progress bar. We can also do this with a style tag. So if we go just above, we have this progress bar just here. So the way to increase a progress bar is to set via CSS the width. We can do this again with the colon. We can bind a dynamic style. And the way we can do this, if we go into the quotations, open this up with the curly braces, we're going to set the width, and this is going to be equal to the event .capacity percentage. And since this is also a string, we also need to add onto the end a string of %. So this is the same problem as before. We seem to have some issue with capacity percentage.
I'm wondering, is it a typo or something?
I'm just checking. So both of those issues are related to capacity percentage. Let's see if I can see anything here. Ah, there. Capacity.
Aha.
So I think that should hopefully fix both the issues that we had before. So and this .event capacity percentage is less than 100.
Yeah, people are pointing out now in the chat, capacity typo.
Yeah.
So
thank you, everyone. So yeah, that's kind of solved both problems. We've now got the progress bar. So if we add 3 names, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, that's cool.
We see that 10 out of 10 gives us a full width progress bar. And if we try to add one more, hit enter. And now because of the conditional just here, this won't let us add more than 10 different names. So thanks for keeping an eye on the chat there, Niall.
No worries. And the other thing we're getting because of these camps is, I'm not saying, but TypeScript would have caught that.
Yeah, well, maybe next time we use TypeScript.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you'll annoy somebody else then.
Maybe a Vue-free version sometime with TypeScript.
That'd be great.
Any more messages before we...
No, there's a couple of things I am leaving to the end because it will derail this completely. So, no, and they're just general, like, overall questions rather than related to what you're doing right now.
Okay. Yeah, so we're just good to carry on then?
Yeah, fire on.
Okay, right. Okay, so yeah, so the app is pretty much it's pretty much kind of functioning, but there's also some improvements we can make. We have the progress bar. We're adding all the names to the guest list just below. A couple of things we're going to do now is to perform some filters, which are going to allow for, say, for example, someone types a name just like this. This is probably not going to look too great. We can also make sure these are provided in a alphabetical order. So we're going to add to our method and also take a look at computed values too. So the first thing we're going to go for, if we go back to our handle submit, so we're taking yeah, so we'll add a message once the user gets to 10 different, once the capacity is full. If we get to 10 names, which is currently our capacity, we'll add a message. So if we go back to handle submit, we'll say if this dot event dot capacity percentage is greater or equal than 100. We can then set a message in our index page. So we don't have a message data property set just yet, but we'll get this ready for when we do. So we'll say this.message, and then we can put something along the lines of, sorry, this event is full. And then we'll store our data property. Just
you have a typo in sorry as well.
Sorry?
You have a typo in sorry.
It will still work.
Yeah, absolutely. I just double check before everyone gives out to you in the chat.
Okay, so yeah, so now once we submit this, it will do a check. So if the percentage has been increased to 100, it will then output or store a message saying, sorry, this event is full. And then we can take advantage of this over in our index page. So where we're going to output this, if we take a look at our app, we'll output this maybe just below our form. So the form area, we can also remove our double curly braces from before. And we can output our message. Refresh. 10 different names. And as soon as we get to the 10 form, we get the message of, sorry, this event is full. So far we've taken a look at Vue's data properties. We've taken a look at how methods work. One of the really good things about Vue.js is something called computed values. Now, a computed value is it works in the same way as a method, but rather than a method which we call ourselves, such as when we submit a form, it will kind of run in the background and it will update the user interface each time it needs to. So if there was something inside of a computer property, such as if we go to the app here, each time one of these data properties, which it relies on, is updated, it will then rerun the computed section and update the user interface. So it's also pretty efficient too, because computed values are also cached. So it won't unnecessarily update the DOM if it doesn't need to. So it's pretty efficient in that sense. So just below our methods here, we'll add a computed section. And we kind of set these up just in the same way as we would with a method. Let's go for sort names. And inside here, we can provide some kind of filtering, some logic. So rather than just simply output what we're doing before, we're looking at all of the attendees at the bottom, which is a simple array. If we add something, as we mentioned before, such as a misspelled name like this, it doesn't quite look great. So we could do some kind of, we could do a filter to make that uppercase for a C and the rest all lowercase. And we're also going to move these in alphabetical order. So to put these into alphabetical order, we need to return a value. We're going to access all of the items in the array. We'll do this with this.attending. We're then going to use the JavaScript sort method. And if we refresh, we won't see any difference at the moment. If we go for A, B, C, and then back to A, we don't see these values are sorted just yet. This is because in the index page, we're outputting these by looping through the attending array. So rather than looping through the data property, we'll change this to be sort names, which is going to match our computer property. Reload, and we'll go for A, B, C. And then if we add an A, we see the two A's are placed at the start. So rather than looping through all of our original array, we're now computing a new value. So before it even reaches the user interface, we're seeing that these have been sorted with JavaScript. And then we're now looping through each one and sorting these down at the bottom. So does that make sense? Does everyone understand computed values?
I see a question of, so a computed method is like a use effect in React.
Yeah, it's basically any time which we want to change something. I mean, before we looked at just looping through a plain array, but anytime we want to allow Vue to sort of watch something in the background and manipulate it, a computed value is good for that. It kind of saves us running a method, because sometimes a method, well, obviously a method will only run once when we call it, but a computed value will sit in the background and sort of take care of updating values. It will cache the values. So yeah, just anytime we need to create any changes and watch for any changes. Here we are accessing this.attending, which is a data property. But if we're accessing anything else on this Vue instance, such as, handle submit is not the greatest example, but if there was a different method on there and this was referenced inside of the computed value, it will detect anytime there's been a change and also rerun this computed section.
Excellent.
So hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and then a couple of other things, not so related. Hold on, let's see. And if you have an object with two properties, it will fire when only one property of the object will change.
Yes. If I understand that correctly. So we're referring to the event, which has multiple properties?
I think so.
Yeah. So the way Vue works, well, at least Vue 2, it's pretty efficient with updating the DOM when there's a change, but only at a component level. So we've not looked at components just yet, but basically, once a component is registered, if there's a data property inside of there, it's kind of smart enough to know that if only one component, we've had 10 components listed, if only one of these components, say, for example, relies on this date information, only that single component will be re-rendered every time there's a change, and it will kind of ignore the other 9.
Yeah. Cool.
That's actually one of the changes with Vue version 3. Rather than updating the full component, it will only update the actual line inside the component.
Nice.
Is reactive data, so that's one of the reasons why it's so much faster.
So then, what about if there are thousands of records to process like that? You just showed, especially from a data store.
Well, yeah. Basically, as we just mentioned, if a single component relies on any one of these pieces of data, unfortunately with Vue 2, it will re-render the full components. So it will use a virtual DOM to kind of diff the full component from top to bottom. Even if any of those nodes inside of there are not dynamic, it will do a full check. It will diff the whole thing. Vue 3 works slightly differently. It will kind of, if we look at the HTML just here, for example, here we have a dynamic node, we have a static node. With Vue 3, it doesn't matter how many different things there is inside the component. It will kind of place them in different sections. It will know that this is static data, so it won't add this to the kind of sections to watch, which is why it will kind of increase the speed. So anything which is data, dynamic, this is all watched just on a sort of a node base rather than a component. So yeah, even if there's 10,000 different lines, 10,000 components, it's kind of smart enough now to know that only that one piece will need to be updated.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah, we're just on a kind of a balance act between Vue 2 and Vue 3. So the way it handles it is slightly different in both.
So from what I can hear, though, for any of those kind of common use case problems are being fixed with Vue 3.
Yeah. The kind of according to the Vue creator, Evan, um, the kind of bottleneck in performance was the virtual DOM, and this whole new virtual DOM rewrite we mentioned before, where it will sort of segregate a dynamic section with a static section. This is kind of the reason why Vue.js's virtual DOM has been rewrote. So rather than in Vue.js 2, if one thing on a component changes, the whole page or the whole component it will need to go from the top node right down to the very bottom and check if anything has changed.
I think you can kind of cover another question here as well, because of what you're saying there. But with this reactive re-render just for the affected node, what happens to children of components? Do they re-render? So if you're doing an update of a line,
if the data filters down between multiple parent-child.
Well, if there is multiple components, say if a component updates, does all of its children still update? I suppose do the changes propagate all the way down? If you're forced to re-update a component, will all of the children re-update as well?
Oh yeah, if I understand it correctly, only if the data is relied on, if that makes sense. Yeah. So if a child and a parent both have the same data, they will both be updated. If a child of a parent doesn't share that data, then only the parent will be updated.
Excellent, cool.
Sorry if I've misunderstood that, but the general takeaway of reactivity, particularly in Vue 3, is it's very efficient at sort of like filtering out what will need to be done, not just on a component level, but also on a node level. So sort of line by line level.
Nice, yeah. Excellent. I'll keep some of those. Rob's asking about a beginner path, and there's some other questions about Axios and a couple other things that I'm keeping a note of here. So I think they're going to be better for like more of a Q&A at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So how are we doing for time?
We are what, 7:30?
Have we still got people watching?
Oh, we do indeed, of course. That's why you're getting such a grilling here, at least. So yeah, you can continue on. I don't want to derail it because I know we could stop and talk for hours really on just questions around Vue.
Yeah, okay. We'll try and move some of those to the end. Then so a couple more things to get through. The first thing I'm going to show you is a filter. So in the app.js here, we've looked at data, we've looked at methods, we've looked at computed. Now again, this is one of those fine lines between Vue 2 and Vue 3. A filter is available in Vue 2, but they are removing it for Vue 3. So I believe the reason for that is because basically most things you can do in a filter can be achieved in a method. So I don't think there's any performance difference between the two. So it's kind of a case of two separate things with the same outcome. So I'll quickly show a filter, but just simply for the reason because, like with any update, there's going to be a lot of legacy code, and we can simply cut it out of the filter and change it over to a method pretty simply. So I mentioned before, if somebody badly formats a name, such as if they type in Chris and a capital rather than the other way around, it doesn't look too great on our application. So we can add a filter which is going to grab that information and transform it before it reaches the DOM. So just below computed, we can add a filter section. And inside of here, we're going to set this up just like a method. So if we go to, say, format name, and this needs to take in the existing value. So if we go to the index, and we're currently outputting the name just here. Let's remove the index. So we have a name value which is currently wrong, and we want to replace this with a new value. So a filter is going to take this value and transform it. So inside of our function just here, we're going to take in this name, and then we'll transform it. and return a new value. So what we want to do inside this filter, we're going to grab the name and we'll slice the very first letter. So we're going to say we've got a name called Chris. We want the letter C to be capital and all the rest of the characters to be lowercase. So we can use JavaScript slice, and we'll grab this from the 0 position, which is the very start. And we only want to grab the letter C. So just above, if we have Chris, this is going to grab from 0 position to 1 and grab the C. So now we've got the value of C, we can transform this to be uppercase. And we can also add onto the end all of the rest of the characters, which is H all the way through to S, and transform these to lowercase. So to do this, we'll also grab the original name and we'll slice this too from position 1. And if we leave out the second value, this will grab everything from the H right through to the end of the string. We'll set this to be to lowercase. Okay, so this obviously is not ideal for long strings of text if we have multiple names, but it's just a simple example to show you how a filter works. So the way we add this, if we refresh our application, go to the index page, and all we need to do inside the double curly braces is to add the pipe, followed by the name of our filter, which is format name. So paste this in, refresh, let's check what's going wrong here. App.js filter, format name. Filters. Filters with an S. There we go. So if we've seen that, it was pretty quick, but if we type in Chris with a capital S, hit enter, and this is now being transformed with the output. So yeah, this is something which was pretty useful in Vue 2, and it's something which I used, but all we need to do when we look at it is take the contents of this filter, and instead if we make this a method, paste this in, we can move the filter section. So we can kind of see if we move this to the methods that both a method and a filter is probably, there's no real reason to use both in Vue version 3. So now if we go back to the index, we can move the filter syntax. And now instead of just simply outputting the name, we have the method, which is format name, passing in the name. And this has the same effect. So if we add Chris, again with the uppercase S, hit enter, and this is now transformed. So it just kind of, a filter is something just to be aware of, really. It's not something which, if you were learning Vue right now, it's something you need to learn, but it's kind of one of those things which, anytime a library or framework gets updated, there's always going to be lots of different legacy code which is around. And if you see a filter, you may think, what's this? So yeah, it's definitely worth knowing that it exists anyway. Okay, so how are we doing in the chat now?
We are all good.
Okay.
People are learning, I hope.
Okay, so if we've got time, we're kind of going to look at sort of, this is a very static version. It's just using HTML, and then we're adding a JavaScript file. So if anybody wants to see it, we'll kind of convert it to more of a kind of like Create React app using the Vue CLI. It's just a quick kind of conversion if anybody wants to see that, or
I think I
people
seen a
dozing
couple of
off.
questions earlier about how to compartmentalize styles and about the Vue CLI, so I'm sure that'd be very useful to some people.
Okay, yeah, we'll do this then.
Even if you want to do part of the application or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of the logic is pretty much there, so it's kind of a case of just copying and pasting. So,
Great.
should I just run through this rather than people following at home, and then it's kind of just people can watch and kind of learn rather than installing the Vue CLI and things like that?
Do you know what? We still have like a little bit of time left. You still have 20 minutes or so. If whatever you think is suits, you could eat. I don't mind going over time. I'm sure people at home don't mind too much.
Okay. Right. Well, as I mentioned before, the Vue CLI is basically a tool, a command line tool, which is going to work like Create React App, and it's going to give us more of a Webpack kind of configuration. And the difference between using this and doing what we've just done is basically we can use components, we can use code splitting, so we can break up all of this content into separate files, and then Webpack is going to kind of bundle it into one output folder. So the Vue CLI, which we see here, it's already installed on my machine. But if you do want to follow along, I'm going to be pretty quick, but all we need to do if we're using npm or yarn is to install it globally. So I'll give people a few moments just to run these commands if they want to.
I think while they're running that, the one question was in the chat here was, what about validation of the user input?
Form validation, or yeah, I mean, it's universal. It's kind of like Angular, React, Node, any front end framework, any standard HTML form, all works the same. You could use obviously the usual hand wrote kind of regex validation. You could use npm packages. So yeah, just basically it's the same it's universal. There's nothing Vue specific in terms of form validation. Obviously, the general practices at the moment with HTML5 is it has the front end validation built in. Then obviously when we're submitting things to the server, we want to check if they match our patterns, if the password matches the repeat password, if an email is an email. But yeah, these are all nothing specific to Vue. There's plenty of npm packages which you can use exactly the same as you would do with React. So yeah, no problems there.
Great. That should be enough time for everyone, I'm sure.
Okay. So I think we'll just go for, let's open up a new Visual Studio Code window and use the built-in terminal. So you can either use your own separate terminal, or with Visual Studio Code, just go to terminal and then new. That's pretty small. I'll just increase this temporarily. Yeah, so the Vue CLI, if you have this installed, all you need to do is Vue create, and then the name of the project. So let's call this meetup -2. Yeah. In fact, actually, we'll need to change CD into, let's go for the desktop. And then we'll run Vue create. Meetup2. So as soon as we run this command, this is going to run in the position where we've set this to be. Mine's the desktop. And then we get kind of the usual setup options. We can choose if we want to include Babel, ESLint. And I'm just going to skip through all this. Luckily, I've got a pretty new MacBook, so it shouldn't keep people hanging around too long.
For sure, yeah. These are always the fun part of Node or
Yeah,
NPM.
yeah. Yeah, this was the kind of we'll see how we get on kind of section, and if we have time. So yeah, I mean it's the setup's pretty easy. It's all taken care of. Node modules will be installed during this section. So as you can see here, we just need to cd change directory into meetup version 2. I'm going to use yarn. We use the yarn serve command to set up the development environment. And in fact, actually, just before we do this, we'll need to also open this up in Visual Studio Code. So we have meetup 2. Just because I know once we drag this in, it will close down the development server. So rather than doing this twice, we'll open this up and we'll run yarn serve. So yeah, mine's opened up on localhost 8080. And we need this just nearby so we can copy over all the information. So localhost 8080, and it's all working. So if you see this screen, this is the equivalent of the React logo spinning after a great React app. So that means we are pretty much good to go. Hopefully nobody's had any problems so far with that.
Nothing in the chat yet, so
No.
and people are never shy.
Good. Yeah, so first of all, we'll take a quick look at what's included. If you've used Great React App, this will all be pretty self-explanatory. We have obviously the node modules, which we can't get away from, a public-facing folder, which has our index page. Now, just something to watch in this index page. This includes our head section, and we have this div with the ID of app. So if we go over to the source, which is going to be all of our components, this is all going to compile into this app section. If we go to the app.view, this is kind of our main entry point. So this is our main parents file. So all of our components are going to go in here. If we want a shared header, we'd include this at the top. If we had a view router, we'd maybe change between these pages. We have a main.js file, which is simply where we're going to import Vue. Again, for React people, this is kind of where we include React and maybe React DOM, that kind of thing. We then tell Vue that this is going to be importing our app, which is the file we just looked at before. This is the main folder. And then we're going to mount this to $app, which is this div just here. So everything which we create is going to be compiled into a big JavaScript file using Webpack, and then output inside of this section here. So to kind of keep it relatively simple, we'll go into the app.view, and what we're going to do, we'll remove the hello world example. So remove this, and we can also remove the image. We'll also get an error too if we don't remove the hello world import. And this will look pretty familiar. We have the export default, which we had inside of our app before. All of the things which would go inside of here are basically what we had before in our JavaScript file. So we can add our data, we can add our methods, our computed section. So we're going to kind of move these over into this new file. We also need to register any components too. So let's remove hello world. And inside of our components folder, we can remove this too. So hopefully that should leave us with a blank page. Everything seems fine. And we can now begin to move over everything we need. Okay, so on the right, we have all of our HTML. And Vue has a concept of single file components. So If we go to the app, we'll see at the very top we have this templates. This is going to be where we place our HTML. We have the script, which is the contents of our script file that we had before, and then a style section at the bottom. I think somebody mentioned before about styling.
Yeah, they were wondering about how to keep styles to a single component.
Yeah, it's pretty simple in Vue. Regardless of which component we're currently in, all of these styles will apply to the full site. If we wanted to apply just to a single component, we just need to add the scoped attribute, just like this. So this will contain all the styles to this single component. So that's pretty simple.
And then one more question there before we completely go off. In the HTML, you already have a div ID equals app. Why do we put it again in the template in app.view?
We're going to only use one. It's because this is boilerplate from the Vue CLI. So this was automatically added in. We have the same one here, but in a few seconds, we're only going to bring in the contents inside of this. So we'll only have one.
Okay, excellent.
Okay. Right. So yeah, grab everything which is inside of this div with the ID of app. So if we go down to the closing tag, which is just here, grab everything. So up to the header. So this is still leaving intact this first div with the ID of app. We're then going to go inside of our app.view and paste this in. So we still have all of the HTML at the top of the file. The next thing we're going to do is to grab all of the app.css. We'll copy all of this and back to the CLI version. Add this in the style section. So back over to Chrome, we'll see how this is looking. Let's open up the DevTools. So the first thing we see, because we haven't brought over any of the script elements, the first warnings are due to the app name not being referenced in here. We have the links, we have the event. So anything which is referenced in our template, so everything between the curly braces, hasn't been brought over to the Vue CLI version just yet. So inside of our original project, we have a Vue instance. We don't need this app section because we already know which DOM element we are mounting to. So let's start with the data. Copy all of the contents, not the curly braces. So make sure this data section is still here. The reason for that is because when we're using the single file components, the data property needs to be a function. So rather than just a property on an object, this needs to be a function. And it also needs to return some values. So once we have it set up just like this, we can paste in all of the data properties. And there we go. Let's refresh to remove the console errors. So anything which is relied on for the sort of front end or the user interface is all in place because of the data. But we see in the sidebar that we have the method of sort names. This is a problem because we haven't brought over the methods to this version 2. So let's copy these over. Methods can be brought over in the original form. That's completely fine. It's just the data which needs to be a function. Set up the closing curly brace, add a comma, and paste this in. So we're still missing sort names. This is because we need the computed section. Because we changed the from looping through the attending array to a computed value, we also need to bring over the computed section, which is why we're getting an error. So down to the script, and we can add this just after our methods. So we have some duplicate keys detected. So the keys are the ones which we have when we loop through an array. So we can see we have an unexpected side effect in sort names computed property. So the reason we get this error sometimes is because here we are basically mutating an array. So rather than mutating the original array, we want to take a clone of that and then loop through the clone. So attending, if we scroll up, is basically our original data. And just like when we use React or different frameworks, we want to clone it and then loop through that or make any changes rather than mutating the original state. So a quick way to do this is if we set up a constant called new names, and we'll set this equal to this dot attending, and then rather than looping through the original data and mutating, we'll change this to be new names. Let's open this up. And there we go. So now this is back working, and let's add a name. We have some duplicate keys detected, but that's just because basically when we're looping through items, we are not setting a unique value. So if we're using a database, we would have, a ID or something more unique. At the moment, we're just setting a key as something such as the index position. So that's not something to worry about for a quick demo. Okay, so any questions, Niall? Or
No, everyone is, I think, enjoying this part because there was everyone was very excited when you said you'd go through this. So,
good.
I think this is the really useful part for people that want to go and build their own apps.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping to get to this section because although using a CDN link is good for beginners, this is kind of once we get into components, this is more real world stuff, and it's kind of the thing that people can kind of relate it more to React with. The idea of these frameworks is we generally split things up into smaller components. So yeah, I was kind of hoping we'd get to this section. So yeah, this is the main concepts where we create single file components and we split them up into a template, which renders a view, which you can see up at the very top. We have the script section, which handles our logic. And then we have the style section at the bottom, obviously for styling. So we won't go too much further, but does anybody want to see another component and taking this out of one file and putting it into a new component and passing props? Or
I think linking one file at least would be a useful exercise here, just to show some props in it. Mihai is asking again, though. He said he doesn't quite understand. He says, I saw you put all the content inside a div with the ID app, but in your project we have a separated HTML file. You still have that div. And he said, maybe I explained it bad. So
this one here. So
I guess he's wondering where does it get in the HTML that it gets mounted to, that there is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's maybe because this has got the word of app, it's maybe a bit confusing. This doesn't matter. We can remove this. This is just unique to this one single file. This won't have any problems if we remove it. The divs which we're mounting to, if we go to the main index page, this is kind of the main section. We have a div with the ID of app, and this ID here is linked in the main.js. So we are grabbing our app.view, and then we're basically going to grab any nested components and bundle this all into one big JavaScript file. And then we're going to mount it to this app section. So maybe before, when we looked at the app.view, this was maybe a misleading ID, which is placed in by default, but that doesn't need to be there. That's just for styling, anything you want to use it for. So yeah,
Perfect.
that one.
Yeah, that makes more sense then.
Yeah. I think maybe having two separate names would have been maybe less distracting. So yeah, I'll quickly move on unless we've got any more questions.
There is, I think the last few questions are definitely going to be overall Vue, the future of Vue, a Vue career path kind of things. So
yeah,
we'll leave them until you've finished the one more component, and then we'll go into a Q&A.
Let's quickly do this. So components folder, pretty simple. We had the hello world, which we deleted before. Let's just move over the header. So it's kind of naming conventions to use two words. So rather than just header, use app.header with .view extension. Just like before, we have the template at the very top, and this is going to render our HTML. So at the moment, we have everything in this app.view. So let's grab the header section, paste this in our template. With Vue 2, just like React, we also need to have one parent element inside of this template. So do be aware of that. We then need the script. And what do we need for this? So this header relies on the links. So we need to pass our links down as props. So back in the app.view, first thing we need to do up at the very top inside of the script is to import this component. Let's again call this the app header from /component, and this is the app header. The next thing we need to do after importing is to add this inside of our script, inside of the component section. So this is just to register our component and say, this is the component's name, this is where it's located, and we're going to use this. We can also give this a alias, such as header, but we don't need to do that. And if we go back up in the exact same place where we had our header, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. To begin, we can use it kind of like this. And component has been registered but not used. It's app header, sorry. So app header. So up at the top, we can see that we don't have the header because the header maybe is there, but we don't have the links to loop through. So we'll pass these down as props, and let's start with what data does this need? It needs the app name, and it also needs the links. So app name is going to be equal. So this is the name of the prop, and the value which we add inside of here is going to be app name. So this is matching. The second prop, again with the colon, since this is dynamic, if it was a static string or a number, we wouldn't need this colon. So the second piece of information we need is going to be the links. And this is just here, so this is the same name of links. Inside the app header, all we need to do before using them is to register them as props. This is an array. So app header and links. We can also do form validation where we turn these into an object and say type of string, type of an array. Obviously, we haven't got time for that, but app header can now be used. Links can now be used since we have this available.
I think you missed in pasting the prop app header is still app name in the other component in your app header.view.
Sorry, we say that again?
In your app header.view,
Yeah.
you have a prop called app header.
What was this app title?
App name, I think, wasn't it?
App name.
It's getting late, Chris. Don't worry.
Keep on top of me. Yeah, so it's there. I think we're just missing the styling. So if we highlight over this, we can see the links are there. We can see the title is up there, but we maybe just need to bring over the CSS. So yeah, that's how we can create a separate component, how we can register it in the parent, and also pass props. I think time's running pretty late now, but just one thing I will add is we can also do the reverse, where we can basically with React, if we have a function and we want to call it from the child inside the parent, we pass that down. We can also do the same in Vue 2 by emitting an event. So is everybody happy with that? Or
I think so. I think there's going to be a good few questions for you.
Okay. Sorry we had to speed through that, but I don't want to keep everybody all night.
No, I think it's been very informative. I'm after learning a good bit myself anyway. Yeah.
I think personally, the sort of Vue experience for me gets better once we use the sort of Vue CLI version, where we can break it down into components. As great as the original version was, just starting with a CDN link, I think you can see in a really small application just like this that it starts to become really bloated. We have a big HTML file, the JavaScript file gets big. Even just bring this over into the app.vue, this is starting to get a pretty long file. So yeah, I think once we start breaking things down into components, things start to get a lot better for the developer.
For sure. I think it's. I think it was a question earlier about scalability, and this is how you make your app scalable. Really, is by making them smaller components. It means we can upgrade them over time as we need them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think these front-end frameworks are so well developed. I think we mentioned earlier the same kind of thing. They're so well developed. The open source, there's so many clever people behind them that for me, the bottleneck is the team which is creating the app rather than the likes of Vue or React itself. I don't think we'll ever get to the point. I've seen a benchmark recently for the new version of Vue where they rendered out something like 10,000 components, each with 1,000 lines and child components and loads of different DOM elements. And, how many different apps are realistically going to get to 1,000 components?
For sure, yeah.
Once we get to that stage, we have teams. It's not a single developer anymore. So scalability is kind of something which you have to scale the team and the knowledge of the team as well as the framework itself.
Absolutely. Let's see. There is a couple of questions I want to get through as well.
Yep.
And Rob had asked about a beginner's path for learning Vue. What was Rob? If you have any more specific questions, you can ask them in there as well. And this might be able to mix in because I think it's something I always tell people not to wait for updates and things. But would you say it's worth waiting for Vue 3 before starting? Since it seems like there's big changes in terms of DOM manipulation. So
no,
a beginner's path and then Vue 3.
So the developer path, I think doing something like this is an ideal way because all you need to do to jump in, I know we've kind of rushed through this in an hour and a half, something like that, but all we've basically done is start with HTML and CSS. So if you know both of those, it kind of leads in its own path because with a little bit of JavaScript knowledge, all we've created, if we go to our original app, all we've done here is create some JavaScript objects. So it's a kind of a natural progression in itself. If you know HTML, if you know CSS, if you know a little JavaScript, it kind of leads on, and then we can do the Vue CLI approach, which we've just done, and build onto that. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. The second one was, which was that one?
So I think the main one is what would you say, especially as a beginner's path to like where would you start? Like what way would you learn Vue if you were starting again, or how did you learn Vue? I suppose is a better way of.
Probably I learned it the opposite way to what we've just done here. I think it was a Webpack kind of configuration, but knowing that and knowing how I learned React the first time round, doing something like this with just the HTML and CSS and then building on it with JavaScript objects is a pretty safe approach. And then you can move on to the Webpack config stuff, which we have with the Vue CLI, breaking it into components, passing props, that kind of thing. I think somebody mentioned the other question was, should they learn Vue 2 now?
Oh, yes, sorry. Should you bother learning before Vue 3, basically?
Yes. All of the sort of DOM updates, the virtual DOM things we mentioned before, they are all behind the scenes. So I think I'm right in saying this, but everything we've just wrote there, except the filter which we mentioned, could basically be taken and put in a Vue 3 app. So all of these changes which we mentioned so far are basically behind the scenes performance improvements. So I'm pretty certain everything we've just learned there is convertible over to Vue 3. Vue 3 features, which it's kind of took a lot of inspiration from React's composition API. So at the moment we have these big long pages where we have our methods and our computed and our data. These are kind of scattered from top to bottom. The whole idea with Vue 3 is the composition API is going to allow us to kind of pull out all of these sections and put them into a function, so they are more kind of composable and reusable. But yeah, I mean, Vue 2, this is all Vue 2 methods and data, and this all works perfectly fine in Vue 3. It's just Vue 3 composition and things like that are additive.
Excellent. There is a couple more things. By static, do you mean const in JS or static properties in terms of HTML? I don't know if I'm missing some context on that one.
Oh, I think early on when we mentioned the virtual DOM, we mentioned static nodes and dynamic. It just, in terms of nodes, it's kind of, if I've understood the question, if we look at when updating our HTML, this is a dynamic node. This is what I was referring to. This is static in terms of Vue doesn't need to worry about ever updating this because it will never change. In Vue 2, it will still check if this has changed. So that's kind of one of the performance benefits of Vue 3. Whereas on the initial render on Vue 3, it will know this is a static node and it will never change. But it will then kind of create a marker on this one.
Anupa is correcting us here and saying this about passing props to components. I think we're saying static, as in things that don't change, we pass down as props.
So, the colon.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in app.vue, when passing props, just like when we rendered out list items, we use the colon for this app name because app name can be changed if we have something which updates this just here. This means that Vue now knows that this is a variable. If we took this away, so let's just take this away and go over to the browser. It's hard to see because of the CSS, but this now outputs this as a string of app name rather than the variable, which was meetup, if that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's it. Then there was a question for what is the advantage between the using the Vue CLI and Vue.component from the CDN. And I think we kind of covered that over basically when you start using the CDN, it gets difficult to scale.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the things behind the scenes of the CLI. In the modern CLI, you can't even see the Webpack configuration. If you look in here, you have to do a terminal command to see the Webpack output. Is it React scripts they call it, where everything is hidden?
Yeah, it's in a node module nowadays. Buried away.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's Webpack configuration. So when we split everything up into different components, that is for the developer's experience rather than the end user. So it means that we can kind of maintain it easier, but ultimately, unless we use code splitting, they're all bundled back together with Webpack. So we can't do this splitting of components when we use the CLI. The CDN. So maybe just use the CDN for learning purposes and a small application, just like we've looked at the start. But once you get to anything probably remotely bigger than this, the CLI approach is probably better.
Excellent. I don't think there's any more questions really, and I think the best place though to get you though, if there is more questions, is probably Twitter. Now that you live there.
I've been known to pop in once or twice, yeah. But yeah, Twitter. If you catch me at Chris Dixon 161.
I have the links in the description below as well. To all your stuff, and you have to, of course. I didn't drag you all this way. You shamelessly plug all of the great things that you're working on as well at the moment.
Probably the big one at the moment is obviously I'm a course creator, so I'm updating my Vue 2 course to Vue 3, and they're also getting a new home to live on. So this includes building the course player platform, which is quite a big undertaking. So hopefully it'll be all worth it. The first sort of course to be released on that is a free JavaScript project course, which is at funjavascriptprojects.com with a dash in between each word for readability. So yeah, I'm looking forward to releasing that hopefully later on this month, maybe next month. The actual platform should be finished in a number of weeks, but some of the videos need to be re-recorded and added to. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that.
Excellent. One last question, because I forgot to ask, and this was asked ages ago, about Vue Axios. Is that a thing, or?
I'm not sure there's a specific Vue version of Axios, but Axios can be used to pull in data in Vue apps. Yeah, we can use it for GET requests, posts. If we're dealing with a back end, if you want to get API data, if you want to post user data, Axios is just generally used. We have, if we look at this app.vue, for example, we have the script, and all we need to do is to import Axios from Axios and use it inside of any of our methods below.
Excellent. Sorry about that. I forgot to ask earlier, so make sure that Sahid was caught before we ran away on him.
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think everyone, if you are interested in learning this stuff, you should definitely head over to Chris's site and grab one of the courses. I guess they're all reasonably priced, I think, as well. What are they? What's the going rate? How much are you stealing from people these days to learn all about this?
There's free courses on there. I think they're mostly around $29 for kind of 6-hour courses to 8-hour courses. So yeah, I try to keep them pretty reasonable. I think the once the new course platform is up, probably we'll introduce country-based pricing, the parity discounts as well. So depending on regions in which country you're from, there'll probably be a discount introduced there too.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you send your email over, if you're interested in Vue 3 or that, if you send your email over to Chris, I'm sure he'll give you a discount code or something nice.
Send it over. Contact me on Twitter.
Yeah, there you go. That's, as I said, that's his home. That's where you'll get him. Brilliant. Thanks a million, Chris. I'm going to end the stream here while it's quiet before we get too much more. It was great having you, and I hope we have you back as well for Vue 3.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It was great to be here.